Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll address this to the whole panel. We all know that Russia and China should be more cooperative and that it would be in their best interest and the best interest of the world if they would in putting pressure on all three of these countries. They haven't been particularly helpful. What recommendations or what suggestions would any of the panel members make to how we can actually get their attention and get them to cooperate? What could we do that we're not already doing? Mr. Woolsey?
I don't have a very good suggestion about China because of its economic power and military power. It's more impervious to diplomacy and so forth, I think, than it used to be. Russia has only one thing that it does. It pumps oil and gas. It does not manufacture anything. It doesn't do anything but pump oil and gas. And it uses oil and gas as instruments of power. I think a system in the United States whereby we have choice at the pump and could have gasoline, let's say, not only ethanol, but methanol made out of natural gas to drive on, the way the Chinese are starting to do. I think if we had something that competed with oil products, so Russia began to see oil consumption and demand for oil going down and a lot of pressure on OPEC, I think that is the two before between the eyes that could get the attention of Russia.
Okay. Mr. Sokolsky.
Two ideas. One I mentioned. It doesn't take much to get the attention of the Chinese if any of their banks get contaminated as outlaws. They get very nervous. Even if it's not much money, they freeze. So that's a lever point. That's the reason why I think you can get the Chinese to attend, not just the North Koreans, if you go after the financial institutions that are laundering this hard currency that's illicitly gained by North Korea. So that's one lever. Two, I think to varying degrees, the Russians and the Chinese, for different reasons, are very sensitive about being accused of violating human rights treaties. But they both are. Forced repatriation of the North Koreans who flee cannot be focused on too frequently, too often, too loudly in this chamber and outside it. And it is not getting the attention it deserves. It's an old song, but we got to keep singing it till people believe it. They, the Russians and the Chinese, for all kinds of deep concerns about control of their own populace, do not want that focused on. Good, focus on it. Finally, something friendly. We always want to, end on an upbeat note. The Russians really do worry about the Chinese and their military. Why don't we listen more to them about that? We actually are concerned too. Far be it from me to make many recommendations about working with the Russians, but on that one, sign me up. That makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Albright?
I think on the North Korean situation, they clearly do a lot of banking business in China. China knows it, and I think if sanctions start targeting that, I think it could elicit a perhaps better Chinese reaction. We'll see. I mean, I think this all has to be tested. China is a very big military power, economic power, a lot of U.S. corporate interests in China. But I think it is time to start putting this kind of pressure on China. We like at ISIS the idea of the country of diversion concern because it's a way to start. We're just asking China to enforce its own laws, essentially. And we want assurances that our products that we're in good faith selling to Chinese companies do not end up in the nuclear programs or sanction programs of Iran and North Korea. So to us, that's a start. But I think it may have to be followed by some more aggressive sanctions, and the banking sanctions or the financial sanctions would be very useful.
Thank you. Dr. Takai?
I don't have recommendations beyond what has suggested. I would just say one thing. The current negotiations with Iran take place in the context of what is called 5+1, the 5 members of the Security Council and Germany, and the last meeting was in Kazakhstan. That particular format has actually, despite limitations that it has, I think, in some ways served us well. When Iranian officials in these particular meetings behave with truculence and mendacity, even the Chinese and Russians are compelled to actually impose pressure and sanctions on them. The reason why I say the 5+1 has served us well, because there is a movement now, and there is some degree of suggestion that perhaps the United States and Iran should move to a more of a bilateral discussion away from 5+1. That actually removes the penalty for Iranian mendacity. Well, so long as they get together in Kazakhstan and they lie in front of all the members of the international community, there's more of a pressure, therefore, to build sanctions on Iran and other measures of coercion than actually doing so in a bilateral context where everybody else is exempt from responsibility.
Thank you very much. My time's expired.
Thank you, sir.